So how does client and server architecture works? Client is something which you see in the front. That is, whenever you go to one website, whatever you see in the front end, it's client. And what does this client do? It shows whatever is in the server. It will help you to input something inside it. And what does server do? Server makes sure whatever the data and database exists, it gets stored properly with securely, and it will also make sure that whatever front end is seeing, that data makes sense. How do these two things communicate? Front end will send request to back end, and back end receives that request and sends response to the front end. When that response is received in the front end will display it to the user. That's how this particular client and server architecture works. Now let me list down some of the front-end technologies. These are the technologies which runs on your web browser, and some of the example will include in front-end frameworks are React, Vue.js, Angular, or even just plain old HTML, CSS and JavaScript. These are the front-end languages, and it will run on your web browser. And back-end frameworks are Node.js and Django, probably PHP, Laravel. All these things are backend languages, and these run on server, and these communicate with the database. And most of the time, any front end people won't be able to see the backend directly. It will have some abstraction level, especially with authentication, meaning you need to have username and password in order to access to the backend. But sometimes you can directly access it also. So this is how server and client gets communicated, and this is how things works. Now the thing is, whenever front end send some request to the backend, there are some specified format in which it needs to send data, so that backend understands what it is supposed to do. This works using HTTP requests, and there are so many HTTP requests, but in this particular video we'll just start with the just introductory things which you might require immediately whenever you start to some kind of front end and back end architecture coding. Maybe you are becoming full stack developer, you need to know exactly what are these HTTP requests are. So first request I want to tell in this particular video is GET request. What does GET request do is it is going to get some data from server. Front end, that is client, will send GET request, and that particular GET request is going to intercepted by backend server, and most of the time backend will send some kind of response back to the front end. That time front end will be able to receive that particular data. This is called GET request. And where this might be used? Obviously this will be used for getting some data from the backend. For example, if you want to get your profile from database, or if you want to get one blog post from database, that's backend server. Whenever you visit one browser page, that time browser will send a GET request to the backend, and when that GET request is sent, backend will send the response back, and most of the time you will see just entire web page. This is GET request. Second request which I want to talk in this particular video is POST request. What does POST request do is from front end you can send some data to the backend. Whenever you send some data to the backend, it will be sent via POST request body, and when that body is sent to the backend knows how to read that particular body data which you have sent, and it will be able to use that data for performing some kind of operation. And of course it will send the response back to the front end, so that you know exactly what's happening in the back end after you send the request. Most of the time whenever you go to one website and put your email ID and password and click on that login button, one POST request is sent to the backend, and that particular backend will receive your email and password, and it will process it in the database and all. That's like backend stuff which we are not going to go in this particular video, but just try to understand that POST request sends data to the backend securely most of the time. Now another request which I want to talk about is delete request. As the name says, delete request, you are going to use this request for deleting some data from the backend. So if you want to delete one user detail, that time you will send a delete request from front end application to the backend, and when you send that delete request, backend knows that delete request is coming from the front end with some kind of data probably deleting the particular user will help you to send one user ID, so that backend intercept that user ID and it is going to delete that particular user. How it's going to get deleted, that is not part of this HTTP request. It's just that from front end you are sending one delete request to the backend, and backend exactly knows that okay, you want to delete something. How you want to delete, that's handled by backend separately. It doesn't have anything to do with HTTP request. So that's what you need to make sure. Then last request which I want to go in this video is a put request. Put request is going to update some kind of data. When you send put request from front end to the back end, it knows exactly that you are trying to update the existing data. For example, you are in settings page and you want to just change your username to something else. So that time you are going to send one put request to the back end where it says that change my name from something to something else. That time backend will intercept that okay, it's put request, so I just have to update existing data. That's all. You might send some data to update, obviously. Without that there won't be any kind of put request. So whenever that request goes to the backend knows that okay, now it's time to update the data. As I said earlier, how it's going to get updated, that's not part of HTTP request. It just knows that okay, something needs to be updated. That's all. So now the thing is, whenever we are in software development or web development, CRUD functionality is something which you will be building in the beginning. So just try to understand that whenever you are doing CRUD, you are going to send HTTP request. First part of CRUD is create. So whenever you are going to create, what do? You send post request with the data. So now you know that whenever you send post request to the backend, you are creating something. Then R, read. Read means you are reading something from the backend. So which request works? Get request. So you are reading some data from the backend. So that time you have to send get request to the backend. Then U means update. Update means, of course, I explained a while back saying like you have to send a put request to the backend. Whenever you send put request, you are going to update something. And as always, D means delete. Delete means you are going to send which request? Yeah, that's correct. You are going to send delete request. And when you send delete request to the backend, that time it's handled that in the backend also it knows that you have to delete something. That's how CRUD functionality works. So now whenever you see some kind of tutorial or something like that, just try to understand that this HTTP request, get, post, put, delete, all these request plays role, and it's not like it will be present only in Node.js or something like that. In all the backend language and all the front end language, you are going to use this particular request because it just communicates from front end to the back end, and whenever that communication happens, there is standard request which you have to send from the front end, and it's going to be intercepted in the back end. So if you want to know more about CRUD, I have made one video here. So that's it for this video, guys. Hopefully you like this video, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.